Well, good evening, everyone. My name is John Kopchak. I'm the director of the Contra Costa County Department of Conservation and Development, and that's the arm of the county that is the planning and building department. And as you'll hear as we go through, we're taking the step of updating our general plan, which hasn't been updated really all the community meetings on that were in the late 80s. And so really for the first time in 30 years, we're updating our general plan. And we're also updating our climate action plan, which is a lot more recent, but really momentous things going on at the county. Our department is really proud to be part of this, and you'll see people with badges like mine that identify that we're staff. You could be from that department, or you could be from our very fine consulting team that's led by PlaceWorks. So we are, and I see my guest speaker is my next, is just stepped out of the room, but I will just say that we envision this as a first of a series of meetings to do some focus on specific topics. And tonight you'll hear about those three topics, which are environmental justice, community health, and I always do this, Daniel, and sustainability. And we've been going around the county. It's been very uplifting for us to hear from the communities. But we've been looking at really at the macro level. This is the first time we're going to look more at a county-wide issue. And a member of our Board of Supervisors and our chair of our Board of Supervisors who takes these issues extremely to heart. He's on the California Air Resources Board, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. He leads our Sustainability Committee, and Supervisor John Joya.
Thanks, John. So first, thanks for coming and spending an evening with us. And let me just say, this is a cozy number. That means you're cozy number of people, so that means you're going to get lots of airtime to be able to talk about your concerns. And just to know, the county has been holding a series of workshops around the county on the general plan. So we have gotten input on some of these policies at our general meetings. We've had a number here and had really good turnout throughout the county, including here in West County. And people have talked about sustainability and health and environmental justice. But we sort of decided it would be good to do a workshop just on these three issues, because these are new elements to the general plan that we will be including. So we're adding four new areas: economic development, sustainability, health, and environmental justice, and I'm really glad to see that. And so, and I know, John, you're taking input from all different types of venues, and I know our Sustainability Commission, and we have a member here, and our Sustainability Director, have also taken up the issue of the general plan and making recommendations, so that's great. Look forward to hearing that. But again, we wanted to do a specific workshop on it, and hopefully we will do another one to really raise the visibility of this. This is a really important time, because it's been a long time since we had a major update to our general plan, and we are adding these new policy areas. So this is a chance to really affect sort of the land use plan for our county going forward for a couple of decades, and zoning policies, as you know, are based on our general plan. And I know there are folks here from West County, but I see there are folks from other parts of the county. So how many of you are not from West County? Raise your hand. Great. So thanks for traveling here, and we'll figure out how to also, continue to do this in other parts of the county. And the one point I'll just close with is to be bold and really think through here. There's a lot happening right now. Richmond in Contra Costa County is considered, I don't know if you know about AB 617. It's a process that the State Air Board has established under state law to select 10 communities around the state of California, highly impacted communities from an air pollution standpoint, to actually look at having the community help develop a pollution reduction plan. And that plan would include actions that local government would take, not just actions by the air district, but land use issues, and recognizing that land use is really important as we think about how to make communities to remove disparity and deal with environmental justice and reduce air pollution. So land use is very important. An example, I'll just throw out an example as you think through this issue. So we passed a general plan policy not too long ago to address zero emission air quality issues as part of new development. So I'll sort of give an example. There's been a number of applications to build warehouses in unincorporated North Richmond. So what we're doing, working with our planning department, is we're actually looking at putting land use conditions that require that these warehouses build out the infrastructure to handle electric trucks. So they have infrastructure, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and looking at requiring those new developments to use zero-emission delivery vans. And the state air board's actually writing comment letters to local cities like Oakland, Richmond, and the county about this. So thinking through, that's an example. So the idea that if we're going to allow a major use like that, a new use, this is a good time to require them to really come in with zero-emission technology that's today commercially available, like delivery vans, so we don't have diesel trucks roaming through our community, adding to the pollution load. So land use is powerful, and I think we can do a lot. So thank you for being here and participating, and we look forward to your ideas. I see 2 members of our Sustainability Commission here, right? Anyone else? Yeah, I see Shoshana and Victoria here. So great. Victoria's from Orinda, Shoshana's from Kensington, so great. You care about, you're in a city, you're in an unincorporated area, but care about what we do. So thanks for serving on that as well. So I'll turn it back over to Joanna and to lead us through. And we did invite, there's actually a hearing going on at City Hall about district elections. Richmond is moving to district elections. And John and I went over there, made an announcement that this is going on as well. And folks want to leave there when they're done, they can come over here. And there were a few folks who may do that. So looking forward to that as well.
Okay, well, yes, I just want to echo the thanks for everybody for being here. We understand that your time is very precious, and so thank you for being here. Also, I just want to say up front that I feel a little like there's kind of a barrier between us, so I apologize for the formality, but we are recording this for folks who can't be here so that it'll be accessible later on. So we are going to use the mic, and later when we have reports back or questions, we're going to be using the mic just to make sure that we're capturing everybody's input and preserving it for the video. Right here as we get started, I want to take a chance for you all to meet each other as well. So we're going to take just a couple moments here for you to turn to someone at your table that you don't know. I hope you're going to meet some new people here tonight and make some new connections. So I want you to just take a minute to introduce yourself, and maybe if you can share information about what brought you here tonight and anything you hope to learn or hope to share by being here tonight. So go ahead and do that right now and introduce yourself to each other. Thank you. You guys will all have a lot more time to talk to each other later on, but I just wanted to give you a chance to at least have 1 or 2 familiar faces at the table. So I'm going to keep going with the presentation now so we can get through the information and then have plenty of time for the tabletop discussions, theoretically. Okay, thank you everybody. I have just a few more slides of a relatively brief presentation. We want to empower you with the information and understanding to be able to participate effectively in this process, in the overall project that I'm going to explain a little bit more about. We have then some time for your questions, and maybe if you do have a question later on, if you can also just share the organization that you're from. I know you've introduced yourself to some of your table mates, but so we can all hear and understand what motivates folks to be here tonight. The majority of our evening is going to be for some knowledge sharing conversations that are really about you sharing information with each other and about us gathering that input and the knowledge that we know is there in the community about these issues. We'll have time at the end of the meeting to all hear from each other, and then we're going to adjourn around 8:30 tonight. So Envision Contra Costa is the name that we have given to a large and ambitious project that includes 4 important planning documents, and I'm going to talk about them individually in just a second. But these documents, the general plan, the zoning code, and the climate action plan, all have a very direct effect on the physical and, of course, therefore, the social fabric of our communities. These are some of the documents in the county that drive where land uses are allowed, as the supervisor said, how they relate to each other, how close they are to each other, whether or not there are concentrations of uses that generate traffic or that by themselves generate unhealthy air quality or greenhouse gas emissions, where there's parks, trails, sidewalks, etc., where people have opportunities to walk and bike and recreate, access to food, access to housing that's affordable, housing that is safe, housing that is stable, utilities and public services. So many of the fabric of our daily lives is driven by some of the ways that these plans are designed and put together. And we're living right now with the legacy of the past generation of plans that, as the supervisor said, haven't been updated in quite a while. So the general plan guides development and conservation in the unincorporated county. And as you've heard, it was last updated in the early 90s, so it really still carries with it a lot of the thinking and what used to be best practices back in the 1980s. But it's time now to update that for the 21st century. In the orange box, you see some of what we call the elements, or you can think of them as the chapters of the general plan. And we put that list up there because it's kind of like a table of contents for the general plan, but it just gives you a sense of really the breadth of topics that the general plan addresses. Not only land use and transportation, but also housing, safety, open space, growth management, public facilities and services, many very important topics. And in addition to those various sections which focus on specific issues, the supervisors have directed us to add the 4 themes that you heard about a few minutes ago. And these are very important themes that we're here to discuss tonight and that are going to be addressed throughout the general plan, in every section of the general plan, because every section touches on these topics in some way or another: sustainability, community health, environmental justice, and economic development. So these are definitely what we want to hear about from you tonight and what we want to reflect back to you ultimately throughout the plan as it gets adopted. The plan has a lot of text, it has a lot of words, it has background information, it has policies that regulate and guide development, and it also has a land use map, which you might have seen this map, or the zoning map, which is built off of this map in greater detail. The colors on this map, you don't have to be able to read the legend. There's a lot of colors, it's a lot of land to cover, but what you should understand is that the colors on this map are what guide decisions about what can be built and where in Contra Costa County and at what intensity. So I don't need to tell you that the decisions about where housing, jobs, parks, new roadways, new infrastructure, where those things are going to be located are driven by the colors on this map, and those decisions have a very direct effect on the health and the sustainability and the vibrancy of the neighborhoods throughout the county. So this map is also an important piece of the general plan. I want to make sure you're aware of that. Moving on to the climate action plan. The county does have a climate action plan right now. It was adopted in 2015. So even though that sounds certainly a lot more recent than the general plan, this is an area where research and data and technology have evolved very rapidly. And in addition, the state has set new guidelines for the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that the state wants to see across all of California. The Climate Action Plan is your local plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions to help to meet those targets. So it will include strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address climate change from land use, transportation, energy use, water use, solid waste, agriculture, a whole array of different activities that take place in the county. And it's also a great opportunity to update both of these documents at the same time to make sure that we maximize the consistency and the correlation between these two documents and that they're working well and supporting each other very strongly. And then finally, the zoning code, which is where we talk about not just kind of where different land uses can be developed, but what actual buildings and sites are going to look like, what really gets built into 3 dimensions. The zoning code, as you might have encountered it if you've had to do a remodel of your house, or if you've tried to open a small business, it just says where the parking is going to go, where your fence can go, how tall buildings can be. All of those types of issues are found in the zoning code. And so again, a very direct relationship to how our communities look and feel and function. And we're going to be updating the zoning code as part of this. That's probably the oldest document that we're working with. The majority of the zoning code that's in place right now is still based on the zoning code that was adopted back in 1947. So we have a lot to do to make that zoning code much more modern, much more easy to use and understand, and much more relevant to the way things get built today. So we're talking about these issues of environmental justice and sustainability and health, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's the law. And I want to talk for a few minutes about a relatively recent state law that was adopted in 2016 called Senate Bill 1000, or SB 1000. It requires the county to integrate environmental justice into the general plan, and that's a big part of the work that we're going to be doing. So obviously when we talk about environmental justice, we want to talk about what we mean, what are we referring to. There are many different definitions out there of environmental justice. You can see the way that the California Government Code defines environmental justice on this slide. But some people, it could be as simple as the basic right of people, of all people, to live, work, play, worship in an environment that's healthy and clean. So it's a very simple concept, no matter how it's defined. And the law is based on the understanding that for many communities, there's a combination of historic discrimination, negligence, political and economic disempowerment, and combined with pollution that is really disproportionately affecting those same communities. So communities in California that are facing that combination of disproportionate pollution burden and also social and economic challenges like poverty and housing instability are considered a disadvantaged community under SB 1000. And our work is to focus on improving conditions in those disadvantaged communities. So in those communities, SB 1000 has a specific list of things that we need to be addressing, although the county is not necessarily limited to that list. But that law specifically talks about reducing pollution exposure and improving air quality, promoting public facilities, which could be as simple as sidewalks or street lighting, or much larger facilities like flood control or wastewater treatment plants, promoting access to food that is both affordable and nutritionally adequate, promoting safe and sanitary homes and addressing things like lead or mold or pests, as well as things like overcrowding and energy efficiency. So a very wide range of topics having to do with safe and sanitary housing in our homes. And then promoting physical activity, meaning it's safe for people and convenient for people to make choices to walk or bike, not just because they want to reduce their carbon footprint, but also so they can improve their public health and just so they can enjoy seeing their neighbors when they're out and about in their neighborhood. And increasingly, we understand that as we lift up these communities that have historically been neglected and underserved, we also need to be aware of the potential for displacement and gentrification. So that's another very important dimension to this. At Senate Bill 1000 also is not just about what topics you need to address and what regulations you need to provide, but also how decisions are made, and really involving the community in the decisions that affect those communities and prioritizing improvements and programs that go to those communities and that address the needs in those communities. So it's not just a top-down way of making decisions. It's a very different way of thinking about engaging communities and making decisions about their future. So SB 1000 includes some tools to help us identify and map the communities that meet the criteria of disadvantaged communities. And when you work in this space, you know that there's several different pieces of legislation that address disadvantaged communities from one angle or another. I'm really focusing here on SB 1000 specifically. The areas on this map that you can see in orange are the disadvantaged communities in unincorporated Contra Costa counties, so areas like North Richmond, the area around Rodeo and Crockett, parts of near Martinez, near the Shell refinery, areas out in Bay Point, for example. You're probably not surprised to see the map of these communities. You have a closer up version of this map on the packet that's on your table, and part of what we want to do tonight is give you a chance to react to that map and give us your feedback and your insights about disadvantaged communities in an unincorporated county. And of course, when we look at this map, we can also see that in addition to the historical pollution burdens that a lot of these communities are carrying now and going forward, they're also going to be facing hazards from climate change and vulnerability to sea level rise and other impacts that we think will probably be exacerbated by climate change. So I'm guessing that all of you are here tonight because you are already actively involved in these issues, because these issues are affecting you and your neighbors day to day, and because you care about these issues and you want to make a difference in the future of the county. So you as individuals have an opportunity to make a difference, your organizations have an opportunity to make a difference, and the county has an opportunity to make a difference. So this slide and the next slide are a little bit about understanding what the county's role is in terms of decision making and influencing future development in the county. The county has the authority to regulate future land use development. So it's a little bit trickier for the county to regulate things that are already on the ground, for example. But in terms of approving new development and planning for future development, that is a very important part of what the county does. Including how projects are designed and placing conditions of approval on projects, such as the regulations on warehouse uses that Supervisor Joya mentioned. The county obviously runs its own projects and operations and programs, and the county can partner with and support nonprofit organizations who are doing specific work in disadvantaged communities or on sustainability or equity-related issues, for example. This slide has some of the examples of the ways that the county is currently engaged on these issues around pollution exposure or public facilities. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but this is just a representational way of which the county is already working with residents, with property owners, and with children and seniors in the county to meet the needs of some of the most underserved residents, and also to make things better across the county for everybody who lives here. And this, again, this is a list of SB 1000 topics that are mentioned specifically in that law. We know that there's other issues that are addressed that our community members face, whether it's issues around incarceration or school or childcare, or other issues that may not be specifically named by SB 1000, but still affect our health and the way that we live our lives in our neighborhood every day. So when we were preparing for this meeting, we realized that we're going to need to address head-on the issues of refineries. We've been doing a lot of these meetings, as you heard, and especially in West County, and especially communities that are close to refineries, people always ask, what's going on, what can be done? We understand that it's a grave issue of concern for a lot of residents. And so we want to be upfront with you about what the role of the county is and kind of what the county can and can't do with regard to refineries. The refineries that are in the unincorporated county were built before existing regulations were in place. And the day-to-day operations and pollutants from those refineries are regulated by a myriad of agencies at the federal, state, and regional level, such as the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and the California Air Resources Board. So I know that can be really frustrating for folks because it means there's not always one place you can go when you have a concern or an issue that you want to see addressed. The county can regulate some specific types of building projects or modernization projects at the refineries, and that's an opportunity for the county to engage with the refineries about issues of operations and pollution and et cetera. So the general plan, I showed you the land use map. That's our opportunity to look at land uses around refineries, as well as transportation infrastructure that serves the refineries and the implications of that. And certainly the safety components of the general plan are a very important opportunity for us to think carefully about emergency response and disaster preparedness as that pertains to refineries. The climate action plan is also going to include some information about emissions emissions from refineries. We know that these are very significant sources of greenhouse gas emissions. But again, those greenhouse gas emissions are regulated at the state level rather than at the local level. So while the Climate Action Plan will provide information on emissions, the strategies are going to be focused on activities that the county has jurisdiction to control. So as I close here, I just want to make sure that you understand your opportunities to contribute beyond tonight. The most important single resource, I think, is our website. It's Envision Contra Costa 2040.org. That we have an online open house there, which is another way to offer input. So if you have friends and neighbors who couldn't be here tonight, that's a place where we can still receive their input, and we're very interested in that. You can also submit comments. You can sign up for the mailing list. We're going to continue to have meetings like this, as well as meetings in individual communities throughout the county, and the information about those will be on envisioncontracosta2040.org. The Sustainability Commission is working on the Climate Action Plan as well as environmental justice components of the general plan, and they'll be having ongoing meetings as these documents are prepared. And then, of course, ultimately, as we get closer to having draft documents that are out and that are ready for public review and comment and that are ready to be considered for adoption, those will be going through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors at public hearing, with many opportunities for additional comment and input to hear from you. So really the rest of our evening here we want to spend in what we're calling knowledge sharing conversations. We're hoping that you're bringing specific expertise and insights on some of the issues that I've touched on, or maybe additional issues that haven't come up yet. And we want you to have that opportunity to share your understanding with each other. You have the 11 by 17 packets on your table that have a series of questions across the top that we're very interested in hearing your feedback on. And we have some extra copies so we can bring those to your table. If you guys would like to stay at the tables where you are, you're welcome to do that. If you want to combine tables and join forces, you're also welcome to do that. It's very informal here, so we want you to combine and collaborate in whatever way you feel most comfortable with. County staff will be coming around, and us from the consultant team, to make sure that we're listening carefully and we're hearing from you. But this discussion is really in your hands to be self-facilitated, so that we make sure that you're able to make the choices about what to talk about and at what level of detail. We have the questions as your guide, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that, but we're not insisting on a specific rigid format for your discussions. So we'll be talking until about 10 after 8 or so, and then we'll have a chance for all of the groups to report back, and I'll come back and go over next steps at that time. Before we do that, we do have some time for questions in case there's anything I can clarify, or if you have any questions that we can help with. Yes? Correct. Yeah, the question is community health a separate group? There's not a separate group that's focused only on that.
So if you can just share a little bit, how are we?
Sure. Yeah, what we've found in thinking about this kind of as practitioners is that it is sometimes hard to keep these topics in a bucket, and we see these issues of sustainability and health and environmental justice as closely interrelated. They do have their own areas of expertise, certainly, and their own bodies of knowledge, but we wanted to make sure that we're thinking about them and talking about them in an integrated way. So that's why we're kind of, at least at this first meeting, addressing all of those topics here. And I'm going to grab the packet here. So you will see that the sheets here have places with questions and space for your answers about environmental justice, but also about health concerns. So if that helps to kind of put some parameters about the discussion of health-related questions, you can certainly do that on this page. But you might find in other topics that those touch on health concerns as well. So wherever it comes up for you, feel free to just make those notes. What other questions? Yes?
I have two questions. One is, I'd like to understand why economic development isn't being discussed tonight if we're looking at the key areas that are overlays.
Yeah, sure. You absolutely are free to discuss economic development tonight. I think it would be hard to talk about these topics without touching on economic development. But I know in my experience, sometimes when we go to meetings like this and talk about, we put a term out like economic development, people feel like, oh, well, that's what businesses talk about. That's for the Chamber of Commerce to talk about, and it can be a little bit alienating or disconcerting for folks. So I think questions about job growth in the county, about industry in the county, those are very much on the table and stuff that we can talk about. We just wanted to try to avoid using a term that would be off-putting for folks.
Thank you. And then my second question is, can you explain where we are in the process? Because, it looks like you use Calendar screen for identifying
Mm-hmm.
the community. Are you using any other screens and overlays?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's been recommended.
Sure, great question. So the question was, where are we in the process and what sources have we used to identify the communities that we're showing on this map? So we're still very early in the process. We don't have any draft documents yet. We're using this input and other input from individual communities to do things like draft policies and strategies, and even the background text that's going to provide the context for those policies in the ultimate plan. So we're still very early in the process. There's not a moment where we said, okay, this is exactly the boundary of a disadvantaged community and we're not considering any changes to that. We're not really approaching it in that way, and part of what we want to hear about is if there's any communities or parts of communities that we've missed in this mapping. So the second question was specifically about the data source that we've used. There's a tool that the state has created that's called Cal Enviro Screen. That's a mapping tool that collected data on 20 different health and pollution indicators and combined all of those to identify the top tier of communities in California where both the pollution indicators are very high and essentially the socioeconomic indicators are very low. So those are the kind of most burdened communities. And that is one tool to use, but there are other tools, and the law leaves it open to us to identify communities based on the criteria that make most sense for every local jurisdiction. So if you look at the map in your packet, there are some other they're only showing the legend as the Cal Enviro Screen top 25%, but we actually did also consult several other databases. The most map-based database is the California Public Health Index. So we also use data from that, which did add a little bit to the Cal Enviro Screen. But these borders aren't final, and if you have additional information to share, we're very open to that. At the back table, yes. Sure, yeah, it's a great question, and it's a significant problem. So the question, I'm just repeating it for the mic for the video. The question is about the kind of obvious correlation between this map and the locations of refineries in the county. And I think that's certainly something that kind of jumps out at us when we look at this map, certainly, and how we can reconcile that with the limitations of the county's role in terms of regulating uses at the refineries. So I think the things that the county can do certainly are thinking about locating future uses near refineries, having buffers around refineries, again, thinking about transportation and other infrastructure that serves refineries. There are ways, like I said, that the county currently permits activities, upgrades, specific modernization types of projects that are an opportunity for the county to intervene and perhaps strengthen regulations. There may be opportunities to consider ways in which existing regulations could be expanded to not only apply specifically to refineries, but perhaps other types of similar or related uses, such as the county's industrial safety ordinance, for example, which is one tool that has made some change in the 20 years that it's been in place in the county. I think there is a role as we think about economic development for certainly laying the groundwork for the next generation of industry in the county and what that looks like as petroleum becomes less of a prominent player over time. So I definitely understand that there's anxiety and frustration and a feeling I wish that we could do more at the county level right now. But those are some of the tools that are available to the county under the current regulatory framework. Yes, ma'am?
I was recently passing out flyers at the Knoll Farmers Market for an event, and given the 3 or 4 of these types of Envision 2040s I've been to, we're still not reaching the people we want to reach. If my city does something, they'll have it online and they'll have an opportunity to come to a gathering like this, and they'll also have somebody at a table from the city at one of the local farmers markets.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go to disadvantaged, hear from the disadvantaged communities where people are gathering, how about you consider a table one of the key environmental justice issues in the communities in which you work, and I know we suggested it be work and live.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, part of the suggestion is to do more and better outreach to reach people who are in disadvantaged communities and are affected by the issues that we're talking about. I very much appreciate that, and we're very open to your suggestions about doing outreach. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's important. And we have been having a lot of meetings within these communities in North Richmond, in Rodeo, in Crockett, in Bay Point. And so it's not only happening at these countywide meetings. We do want to create a platform for countywide level discussions. And this meeting, we really focused our outreach on about a little bit about 150 specifically nonprofit organizations who are doing work in these issues, and emailing them directly to invite them to come. And that's part of the reasoning behind the words, the communities in which you work. But certainly from the point of view of residents, it could be the communities in which you work or live or where your kids go to school or anything like that. So thank you for that. Any other questions before we start letting you guys have a chance to talk? Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and I encourage you to join a different group if you want to at your table, and if not, just go ahead and dive in with these questions. You can address them in any order. Tanya's going to help us keep track of time, so we have time to make it all the way through, and we'll reconvene around 8:10. Thank you. It could be the communities in which you work or live or where your kids go to school or anything like that. So much, everybody. I know we're just wrapping up some of the conversations. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for talking to each other and sharing your knowledge and your ideas with us. Again, I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful to all of you for being here. I want to make sure you're aware of the next steps. We have a couple of community-specific meetings coming up. This Thursday, we're going to be in Rodeo. So these meetings are very focused on the issues that are specific to that individual community. And they include a lot of the topics that we've touched on here tonight, as well as many other topics. So we have a draft profile for Rodeo that we're going to be looking at with that community. It's based on the input that we've gotten from them at a couple of past meetings, and we're going to be getting their thoughts on our draft. And then Thursday, December 5th, we're going to be having another similar meeting out in Pacheco. We want to have a couple more meetings in El Sobrante and Bay Point. Those dates may be getting pushed out a little bit until after the holidays to make sure that we don't inconvenience people too much. We are thinking about having a very similar meeting to this collaboration in East County, but we're also going to be exploring other options, other meeting formats. I think we'd love to see a lot more people in this room, and we need to put some thought into configuring a meeting, locating it, timing it, and et cetera, so that we can get more people involved in these conversations. But we anticipate having more conversations like this and evolutions of this conversation. And as I said earlier, all of those meetings, when we do schedule them, and the materials for those meetings, the archive of this meeting and the video that we've been taking tonight are all going to be accessible at envisioncontracosta2040.org. So I do hope you'll visit the website. And thank you in advance for doing that. So before we close, I want to hear from each of you guys. I would like to ask you to please come up to the table, whoever is giving your report back from your table, to share with your friends and neighbors what you talked about, some of the highlights of your discussion. You don't have to feel obligated to repeat everything that you said, but some of the most important ideas or agreements for you is what we want to hear about. And we do want you to use the mic again just for the video and so that we get an accurate record of tonight's discussion. So do you guys want to start, Marty? Fantastic, thank you.
Great. Well, we had a great discussion on key environmental justice issues. The obvious ones, air quality in the refineries were a huge issue that came up. Displacement and gentrification came up. Access to recreation and open space, which builds a sense of community, brings health, so many co-benefits. And I think the most important thing that came up was we felt there was really a need for a place for people in fence line and frontline communities to have voice in this process and in an ongoing way through an EJ advisory group or some other mechanism to make sure that we're really hearing community voices. And we did discuss that the Sustainability Commission fulfilled a really important function, but not that function. On health concerns, the main thing that really popped out is that we identified all the downstream diseases, the asthma, high blood pressure, so on, that we can see in the data. But when you talk to patients, they talk about the upstream problems. They're talking about food access, job security. How are they going to pay their bills? Do they have housing security? So really, we have to we have to be looking upstream as well as downstream when we talk about health. We also brought up, kind of peripherally in the health area, we were talking about a lot of environmental risks, and I'm just gonna bring up the dredging thing here because it came up. There was a really strong reaction at our table. I guess this came up more for climate change, which is coming up next, but a feeling that the county really should step back from any role in supporting dredging of the Carquinez Strait and should really not support this because of the fact that coal will be shipped and also that will increase oil shipments. So that ties right into the fact that we're facing climate change, which we talked about, the most urgent, fast emergent, #1 threat to human health, as well as just health to our survival. We had concerns about safety in our county, that there's a lot of threats from sea level rise and wildfires that are being exacerbated, things like the New Star explosion. If it had happened when we were having our winds, there could have been a conflagration. So this leads to problems with evacuation and taking care of people. This really raises the question as whether we really can afford to have these risks in our county, have these facilities in our county anymore because of what's happening with climate change. And related to climate change, we talked about the importance of resilience and the fact that people with means can find ways to be resilient and adapt, but we have to make sure that we bring everybody along in being resilient. We had some suggestions on the map. I won't go into that really. And then we had, we named a lot of other plans that the county could look at, including the LA's Green New Deal, including the Seattle Kings County plan. We mentioned a few others as well, as a few other resources the county could use too for identifying disadvantaged communities. What do you think, group? Is that it? Okay. Absolutely, yes. We got very excited about the fact that this is to 2040, we were thinking. So we have to be bold and think big. If we aren't really looking about having some sort of transformative shift with all the challenges we're facing by the time we get to 2040, we aren't thinking right about this opportunity for the county.
All right, fantastic. Is the table back here? Who's gonna come on up? This table had a very hard time selecting a spokesperson. There are a number of very articulate and intelligent folks back there. All right. Thank you, Shoshana, I appreciate it.
You know, you guys were so organized. And we covered a lot of the same ground, perhaps in a less systematic way. So I'm a little embarrassed to be up here, to be honest. I think that, you know, we felt comfortable with the categories that you all identified. There are already such horrific problems with under-resourced folks, right? Who don't have the basics, who are struggling to have the basics. And then we throw climate change into the mix. So we get an intensification of already existing daily life hazards, right? So how do we approach this? And I think we were a little stymied about the fact that Contra Costa, great place to be. Second most industrialized county in the state. It's a rich tradition. You know, it's a good thing. We're in a proud industrial town, right, where this meeting is being held. But we also understand that the industries, as much as they brought us so much, you know, are also bringing us heavy pollution, are bringing us health hazards, extreme health hazards, are bringing us climate change, rapidly accelerating climate change. What are we going to do about this? There are four refineries in the county, but only 3 under county in unincorporated land, right? So we're really looking specifically at 2 refineries in Martinez and 1 in Rodeo. And I mentioned, I know this is perhaps inappropriate, but I mentioned the situation of Bayo Vista, which is a tiny little community literally on the fence line of Phillips 66. And its landlord is the County Housing Authority. Folks are not well there, and they have no other place to go. They are in county housing. And I think that the county probably would have found a better location for this community had it had a good place to move them. So we're talking about perhaps buffer zones around polluting facilities. I know it's complicated. I know this is a big one for the general plan, but we have to figure out what we are going to do really to immediately address this heavy toxic pollution burden on our communities. I know it's not an easy situation, right? But we've got to figure it out sooner than later. And Bayo Vista needs help. I think that's kind of it. So how can we use our zoning codes and our land use regulations to address facilities that have been there since the turn of the 20th century? They're grandfathered in. What can we do? I would also like to start thinking about the categories of construction. We know that we can control building permits, how they're issued and so on, but what about operational use? And I really want us to kind of think outside the box a little bit about those categories. And I hope I'm representing the wishes of my table here. All right, thank you very much.
All right, excellent. You guys want to close it out here? Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie.
Hi. We felt much the same as the previous speaker, that the impacts from the refineries and other industries are the biggest problem. And we had a couple of specific ideas. Again, a 2,500-foot buffer zone between industry and all other uses around those polluting and damaging industries. And then we thought there could be other ways to perhaps regulate refineries. For instance, can we raise taxes on them? Can we put in a pollution tax that then goes back to the communities and pays out as some kind of mitigation for the situations that they are living in? Perhaps, it subsidizes local health clinics, for instance. We thought there should be a lot of planning in the zoning codes for sea level rise and also impacts to those refineries. And land use needs to look at the future and implement policies that help people avoid living in risky zones for fire and flood. Let's see, and that should also apply to infrastructure. We have to look at other infrastructure. We talked about the fact that the Amtrak trains are also going to be flooded in the future. We thought that there should be new building codes for high efficiency, high energy efficiency on all new construction. There should be a ban of natural gas in all new construction, just as has been done in other cities. Let's see. And of course, we should be looking at the future chemical productions at the refineries. So say they stop doing fossil fuel refining, but what if they start going into some kind of plastic production? And so there should be a limit on their future permits. Things should just not be grandfathered in. They should be very, very limited. So we come to an end of those industrial uses that are so damaging to the communities near them. And transportation, we would love to see free public buses, a dedicated free bus lane, and of course more BART trains and perhaps BART lines to East and West County. Those would be a wish list. We thought the general plan might want to look at how we look at the safety element and separate the natural from the man-made safety elements, because that downplays the, again, the risk of industrial disaster. And I think that's it. Anybody else from our group want to pitch in? No, there's probably a few more on there. We had more of a laundry list than going through the questions. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. That's what we have on our agenda for tonight. Again, I just want to close by thanking all of you very much for being here and for being engaged in this process. This process is a lengthy one because we want a lot of opportunities for input, discussion, and deliberation. So I hope you will continue to stay involved. I hope to see you again, and I hope next time to see you bring a couple of friends as well. That would be great. So thank you all. Please check out Envision Contra Costa 2040.org to stay in touch with us and with the process. Thank you.